Russian dictator Vladimir Putin said he will not make concessions in talks to end Russia's war against Ukraine. He claims that regardless of the Trump administration's efforts, Russia will seize Donbas and more before any negotiations, and even then he will set new terms. And so far, Trump is praising the negotiations between Putin and Witkoff for reasons that are unclear. The Russian dictator himself, through his behavior, explained what he is counting on in these peace negotiations. From the start, it was clear the recent meeting between Kremlin officials and American negotiators was unlikely to bring peace to Ukraine. After about 5 hours of talks, long but fruitless, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner came out with practically nothing. Russia did not make any concessions. And now Putin is making it clear that he is counting on Trump simply getting tired and giving up Ukraine to Russia. But that's not even the worst part. Western sources claim that the latest round of negotiations showed that Putin has completely lost his fear of Trump. The Kremlin realized that all of Trump's threats are just empty talk, and that Donald Trump himself is more likely to make any deal than to prepare any new strikes against the Russian Federation. My name is Pechiy, let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video, where we post breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. I would appreciate any support from you. So, today Vladimir Putin commented on the negotiations with Steven Witkoff and Jared Kushner and directly stated that he doesn't care at all about all those points of the peace plan that the Americans brought him. Putin explained why the negotiations lasted so long, but ultimately led nowhere. According to him, all the proposals contained in the American peace plan were already established during the Russia-United States summit in Alaska, so there wasn't really much to talk about. Putin also noted that the Americans divided the 28 points into 4 blocks, and they suggested discussing each of them separately. And that's why, as Putin states, the negotiations lasted so long. They had to go through each point of the proposal. In other words, Putin is saying directly that it was the Americans who needed these negotiations, they were the ones who asked, and he just accepted them and gave them his time. That's the message Putin wanted to send. I don't need these negotiations. Trump sent his clowns. I just talked with them. Next. Putin stated that the demand for the withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine from the territories of Donetsk region that remain under Ukraine's control has not gone anywhere. That's supposedly what it all comes down to, and here's the quote. Or will we liberate these territories by military means with Ukrainian troops leaving them and stopping the fighting there? And in the end, Putin just spat, I would even say, excuse my language, spat right in Donald Trump's face. Witkoff and Dmitriev came up with what they thought was a sweet treat for Putin. In the form of a promise from the United States to return Russia to the global economy, to which Putin stated, quote, Russia is not seeking a return. The G8 and such promises Trump can keep to himself. Putin says, where are you planning to return us to? We don't care about any of that at all. It's just humiliation for Trump. He's simply humiliating Trump when he says, you're promising me the G8, right? I don't care about your G8 at all. After Trump speaks, he calls it a good conversation. Putin did well and wants peace. Here's a relevant cable news network quote. When Putin hears Trump say that Ukraine is not his war, that he doesn't want to spend money on it and just wants it to end, Putin hears weakness and indifference from the world's largest military power. This is an opportunity that the former KGB spy probably never even dreamed of, that history would give him such a chance. The United States is begging Russia to make peace, and the longer this process lasts, probably the better the result will be for Moscow. But today the Times writes that weeks of negotiations and diplomacy, rewritten peace plans, and the visit by representatives of the Trump administration to the Kremlin have not brought an end to Russia's war against Ukraine any closer. But it did show that Putin has completely lost his fear of Donald Trump. Quote, on the morning of Wednesday, December 3, a private jet with Trump's special envoy, Steven Witkoff, took off from the airport in Moscow. It became clear that Washington had once again overestimated the willingness of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to give up his goal of completely subjugating Ukraine, since no further negotiations are planned, and the war will likely continue until the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. In fact, the only tangible result of the latest United States peace initiative was the deepening of the rift between Europe and Washington, which is undoubtedly welcomed in Moscow. And here's one very important observation for you. Putin is satisfied with the course of the war. As you can see, he puts on his military uniform 3 times a month and personally gives orders to his generals. The fact is, when the war was less successful for the Russians, he didn't associate himself with it this intensely. On the contrary, he was, trying to stay on the sidelines. He was like, no, I'm just here in my jacket. I'm not involved in the war at all. Now, on the contrary, he's always in uniform. That is, he's sure that Trump won't do anything. Trump won't do anything at all. Last month, after negotiations in Florida between Witkoff and Putin's envoy Kirill Dmitriev, a 28-point peace plan appeared. In Kiev and among Ukraine's European allies, there was concern that Washington was trying to force Ukraine to make a deal that would require giving up some non-occupied territories, to agree to a ban on joining NATO and allow Moscow to set limits on the size of Ukraine's armed forces. After tense diplomatic negotiations involving British, French, and German officials, the peace plan was changed to make it more acceptable to Kyiv, but any agreement acceptable to Ukraine is automatically rejected by Moscow. And if we look at the situation with a cool head, we understand that the only factor that can change the current situation is an economic or military collapse of one of the sides. In our case, such a collapse should happen in Russia, and Trump has the tools for this. And if Putin were not 100% sure of Donald Trump's complete inaction, he wouldn't be acting so brazenly. That means he's sure Trump won't strike. He's sure Trump will continue to distance himself from the problem. If Putin had even a little doubt about this, he wouldn't have been acting so brazenly these past few days. But it's the Europeans who aren't letting Putin sleep, because, they've turned out to be much more resilient than the American leaders. Putin was clearly angry at the European leaders after they helped rewrite the peace plan, and as you know, Putin immediately started threatening Europe with a big war and his courtiers. For example, someone like the leader of Chechnya, Kadyrov, is already promising Putin that Europe will end up apologizing to him. Today, Kadyrov promised that he would make Europe apologize to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, that bald loser. And now, with little hope for peace, Trump is faced with the choice of abandoning negotiations or trying to put more pressure on Kiev or Moscow. In October, the United States president sanctioned Russia's 2 largest oil companies. As you know, he rejected the idea of providing Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles which could strike targets in Moscow. That's why now Putin's fear of Trump and the United States has clearly decreased. He realized that Trump can be manipulated, and now Putin's main bet is on Donald Trump's indecisiveness. Also, Putin's team is counting on the United States completely withdrawing from affairs. And here, I'll quote from today's article in the Times. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky hopes to present his position directly to President Trump and urge him to increase pressure on Russia. But it's unlikely that the United States president will respond with much enthusiasm. Moscow has probably correctly calculated that it's enough to dangle the prospect of a business deal in front of Donald Trump and then deliberately dash his expectations. Putin believes that Trump will quickly get tired of this hassle and start blaming the Ukrainians for being inflexible and the Europeans for being stubborn. Such a tactic could sow discord in NATO, fear in Europe, and despair in Ukraine. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye.